Right, so there is unease in the Cabinet at the speed of these new restrictions. One Cabinet member told me that introducing them today was really bad timing. They simply said, why not wait until next week? And the significance of that is that senior Tories say they were told by ministers yesterday that this wouldn't happen until next week. One former Cabinet minister told me it's strange doing this now. Why now? And they said that it was obviously a dead cat strategy. But they then added it's a pretty cynical and inept one because it looks so obvious and it's blowing up in their face. Now, Downing Street say there is absolutely no politics to these new COVID restrictions. The new variant is spreading very rapidly. That was pointed out by Professor Chris Whitty, the UK government's chief medical advisor, and he fully endorsed these measures today.
Nick, what is the sense you're getting of the Prime Minister's position within his own party?
Well, I did speak to one member of the Cabinet who was very impressed by Boris Johnson's apology in the Commons for that video of number 10 aides making light of the Christmas party. This minister told me Boris had to be firm, and he was. But then I do have to say I found widespread dismay amongst ministers and backbenchers. One minister told me this is a catastrophe. Colleagues are really down on this. And then listen to this. This is a former cabinet minister who is an original Boris Johnson supporter. They said to me, Boris is like the Bond villain. He will escape from the sinking ship in a pod with his cat. He will leave behind a sinking wreck. That process is now underway, and this is doing immense damage to our party. And then listen to this. This is from an original supporter of Boris Johnson who is also a strong Brexiteer. And this person said to me, former minister said, the tectonic plates are shifting. A lot of colleagues are saying we need a reset. And by that, we mean a change of Prime Minister. I have just had enough. It is mishap after mishap. And then this former minister went on to say, I thought that Boris Johnson was a once-in-a-generation transformational leader. I was right. Only he could have delivered Brexit. He did that. But now we can't keep going on like this person said to me, for the next 2 years. We will lose. Now, when you hear language like that, you sort of consult an elder. So I did consult a grandee, a very measured figure in the party. And they told me that they had heard colleagues in the tea room saying that the Prime Minister is on the skids and the tectonic plates are shifting. But then this person said to me, I would say Boris Johnson is now on probation. Maybe he'll have a good Christmas and we'll come back and all will be fine. But this is a weak Downing Street, and I'm not sure that it's going to change, because the problem is Boris Johnson simply will not take advice. He will not listen to people. So, Emily, look, it's been a potentially defining 48 hours for a Prime Minister who does seem to be stumbling rather regularly. A troubled Prime Minister struggling to command events. Normally the master of his destiny, Boris Johnson now finds himself assailed on multiple fronts.
Why should people at home, listening to the Prime Minister and the Secretary of State, do things that people working in number 10 Downing Street are not prepared to do?
A rebellion brewing tonight over new COVID restrictions. Anger fuelled after Downing Street staff made light of a Christmas party last year, reportedly held in defiance of the rules.
My remarks seemed to make light of the rules that people were doing everything to obey. That was never my intention.
And this evening that aide fell on her sword.
I make no excuses for the frivolity with which the subject was handled in that rehearsal that people saw in that clip, and there could be no excuse for it.
Some contrition from the Prime Minister and the announcement of an inquiry into whether and how the party was held. An unhappy political mess which has prompted many Tories to accuse the Prime Minister in private of tightening COVID restrictions to deflect attention away from his troubles. The new changes will mean that in England, from Monday, there'll be guidance to work from home where people can. there'll be a legal requirement from Friday to wear masks in most public indoor venues, though not for hospitality settings. Proof of double vaccination or a negative COVID test will be needed to enter nightclubs and venues with large crowds. And daily testing will be introduced for people who come into contact with someone with COVID.
While the picture may get better, and I sincerely hope that it will, we know that the remorseless logic of exponential growth could lead to a big rise in hospitalisations and therefore, sadly, in deaths. And that's why it's now the proportionate and the responsible thing to move to Plan B in England, while continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the devolved administrations, so we slow the spread of the virus, buy ourselves the time to get yet more boosters into arms.
Across the road in Parliament, deep unhappiness on his side.
It's deja vu all over again. Can I remind the Secretary of State that in March 2020 we were asked to impose restrictions for 3 weeks while the health service capacity was increased. Can he tell the House how much that capacity has now been increased?
And today he comes with his latest in a long line of arbitrary, unnecessary socialist measures, supported by the socialists on the other side of the House as well.
One rebel issued a call to arms.
Well, I hope everyone will vote against it, because vaccine passports should be completely unacceptable in this country. This is not a path that we should go down in a society that prides itself, a government, frankly, that should pride itself on the free and liberal, with a small L, tradition that the UK is proud of.
These corridors will play host next week to a pre-Christmas rebellion by Conservative MPs whose unease about the speed of these new COVID restrictions is shared right up into the Cabinet. And those rebels and ministers have another concern, that the apparently lackadaisical approach of some in Number 10 towards the rules has fundamentally weakened the authority of the government in enforcing new restrictions. Symbols of peace and goodwill on display at the seat of power, but not in the air in a vociferous Conservative Party.
Nick, what there? Well, we invited the government onto the programme tonight. They said no, but I'm pleased to say we're joined in the studio by the Labour Shadow Leader of the House of Commons, Thangam Debbonaire, and by Senior Conservative backbencher Peter Bone. It's very nice to have you both. Peter, can I start with you? Are you feeling the mood that Nick described amongst your colleagues tonight?
No, I did listen to that, and I thought that was a little over the top. I think there's a lot of support for Boris. There's a lot of unhappiness about some of the measures announced today, and I think there will be a major rebellion on those on Tuesday when it comes before the House. But unfortunately, Labour's going to support them anyway, so the government will get through. So there is unhappiness about what was announced today, but generally I think that they're very supportive of the Prime Minister, as I am.
What about his answers to Keir Starmer today? Did you believe he was telling the truth?
Oh, absolutely. Someone told him, look, if you're the Prime Minister, you've got 1,001 things, and he probably said, look, there's a problem about parties. Did they happen? And someone went off and came back and told him, probably someone quite senior down, said to him, no, they didn't happen, and that's what he's told Parliament. Now, if I'd been Keir Starmer, I think he missed a trick by not saying, who told you, Prime Minister? Because Prime Minister was obviously relying on somebody telling him. You can't expect the Prime Minister to go skirting around.
But just explain then, why was Allegra Stratton the fall guy for the Prime Minister if he's sure that there was no party?
I felt very sorry. I felt very sorry for her. I didn't see why she had to resign. We've all done these mock interviews. You will have done these mock interviews. Yeah, and you know there's a black humour there when you're trying to work out what to say. So, and we only saw.
But I just don't understand why, if there was no, we wouldn't have made anything of that video at all if there'd been no party. So he insists he's been told there was no party. Why would she have to resign? It makes no sense.
I didn't think she did have to resign in my view at all. And I think
he said he was furious. He said he was furious at the video,
yes, but you looked at
about a party that never existed.
No, but I think he was furious on the fact that the joking was there. But in reality, we know that what's happened when you prepare for things, and sometimes you use black humour. We only saw a very limited amount of that. And I wonder how that recording got out, and I wonder who's behind putting that recording out. Somebody who's trying to do the Prime Minister down. I mean, Prime Minister was nowhere near any party, so...
Well,
the
scapegoat seems to have been Allegra Stratton tonight. Let me turn to you, Thangam, because Peter Bone asked a question. Why didn't Keir Starmer just say in the Commons today, who was it that told you?
Well, he has 6 questions. I think he used each one of them well. He managed to persuade the Prime Minister relatively easily that whatever the results of the Cabinet Secretary's investigation, they would be handed over to the Met. I think that was pretty successful. I think he managed to expose the fact that there's a real contrast between what Keir Starmer would be like if he was in number 10 and what Boris Johnson's been like. So this denial of the party, but yet somehow Allegra Stratton's had to resign, this makes no sense. And I think this was illustrated very clearly. I mean, Allegra hadn't resigned by the time we had Prime Minister's questions. But it was, in many senses, it was exposing where the responsibility lies. I think that's exactly what Keir Starmer did today. And he drew a real contrast between his own very measured, thoughtful, but yes, quite strongly expressed questions, and Boris Johnson's kind of all over the place.
Because you still don't have any further details. You've got an investigation into one party that could, throw the whole thing into the long grass, and the Met have said tonight that they're not going to investigate it. So I wonder, is that the end of the road for you?
There wouldn't need to be an investigation if there hadn't been something happening which somebody somewhere clearly wants us to think was a party. Now, I think if it looks like a party, it smells like a party, and it sounds like a party, it probably was a party.
Does Labour have any proof? Do you have any idea of people who were there?
This is not for us to prove. This is for Boris Johnson to explain. It took place in number 10 Downing Street, where I think he is resident. He apparently is still the Prime Minister. He obviously knew there was something happening because he said that it was not a party. So he can't know that nothing existed and wasn't a party without knowing what happened. Now, I think Peter's right, and I will be asking Jacob Rees-Mogg tomorrow morning. I'll give him fair warning. I will ask at business questions, who was it who told the Prime Minister that? But there's so many unanswered questions, aren't there, Peter? So many things aren't answered.
I mean, you're not saying there wasn't a party, presumably.
Well, I don't know what happened, and I think the Prime Minister was told there wasn't a party, and that's what he told the government.
The issue isn't about the party, though, is it? It's about the hypocrisy, and that's the problem, is the fact that we're even talking about a possible party in number 10 Downing Street, which took place on a day when around 500 people died in this country of COVID last year, many of them alone, many of them being separated from their loved ones. That's what's hurting people, isn't it?
And today we saw the introduction of new restrictions. William Ragg, your Conservative colleague, said it was a diversionary tactic. Do you find that unbelievably cynical or believable?
Well, I think perhaps William's wrong on that, because the first thing I thought, oh my gosh, this is a diversion. But then when I checked around, it did seem that the scientists were very, very insistent, because of the huge increase in this new variant, that it had to be announced straight away. Now, it would have been nice if we announced it in Parliament first, that we were able to scrutinise the Prime Minister, and then they could have had as many press conferences as they liked afterwards. But that's, I guess, a separate thing. I don't think it was done to take away what's now called Partygate.
And now you're going to vote against your own government, and you're going to vote with the government. I mean, there is something slightly weird about this, because you've just told us how little you believe what the Prime Minister says, and yet you're going along with his
No, we're going along with the scientists.
Okay.
And the scientists who've been measuring the doubling rate of the Omicron variant are telling us very alarming things. I mean, only just last week, I think there was only a handful, and now we're at 580 something. This is really problematic, that we've got a variant that's doubling at a very rapid rate, and the predictions are at the moment that we could have as many as 1 million cases by the end of the month. So we're voting with what the science is pointing us towards. We've done that throughout. I think it's pretty rich, frankly, of the Prime Minister to complain at lunchtime that we're always behind the curve, when we've actually been solidly supportive of every sensible decision that's been taken to protect people, and critically scrutinising when we've needed to be. That includes today. Because, I mean, actually, Peter and I agree on this. I don't think that the Prime Minister should have announced something at a press conference, which is a pattern, I'm afraid, in his government. It's a pattern, and he shouldn't be doing it.
But what I don't understand, are you saying then that Labour would go further and have a complete lockdown because of how serious it is?
We've not said
so you're saying the Prime Minister's got it right with these measures?
No, what I'm saying is that we're at a stage now where we do need to take precautions. We actually thought several weeks ago that we should be having compulsory masks. We called for that several weeks ago. We also called for working from home to be more readily part of the guidance. They've now caught up. The government has now caught up with what we called for weeks ago. So, yes, I'm supportive of that.
They've been too slow. Do you think that this has come in too quickly?
I think certain of the measures are wrong. I think the vaccine passport, there's no benefit whatsoever. It affects our civil liberties, and why not just test people before they go to venues?
Can I ask you about a comment that Boris Johnson made that has been tweeted out? He said, we need to have a national conversation about ways to deal with this pandemic. We can't keep going to lockdowns, and there was a bit more, but, you know, the bulk of what he was trying to say was we can't keep using sort of pharmaceutical methods just because 20% won't get vaccinated. Now, that has been interpreted by some commentators as a sign he's heading towards a compulsory vaccine. Is that what you're hearing?
Well, that's what some media have said, but let's face it, compulsory vaccination would be completely outrageously wrong, and I'd be first to say the Prime Minister should go. That's not what he said.
I think he should go, did you say?
If we were, yes, he should go if we were going to have compulsory, if you had to stick
that
a
would be enough for you to call for his resignation.
Well, I don't think the whole country would have been up in arms about it, but that's not what he said, of course. And I mean, I don't know whether Labour are in favour of compulsory vaccination.
Are you?
Well, we'd rather everybody took the vaccine because it's the right thing to do and because it's safe and it's effective.
But I agree with
this
that.
wouldn't be a suggestion. This wouldn't be a suggestion.
Well, we're still dealing in hypotheticals, aren't we? Where we are at the moment is there's a discussion about that to be had, and I think there is a discussion that we look at the evidence at every stage. At the moment, of course, we would rather everyone was persuaded by the arguments that it's safe and effective.
You're not ruling out compulsory vaccination.
I don't think we should ever rule out anything that is necessary to protect people.
Well, I think that's outrageous.
I think that what we're focusing on at the moment is that the Health Secretary set out today that we need vaccination passports for certain big venues, which incidentally, if the limit is 500, should include the House of Commons chamber, where we can actually fit more than 600 if we choose to. So I think that's quite interesting.
If you have to show your vaccine certification?
Well, that isn't going to happen.
But the Health Secretary said, I think I've got this right, that it's about venues that are indoor venues with more than 500 people. I do think that concludes the House of Commons. Well, I think...
look, if someone told me...
I don't know either.
So they lose Peter Bone from the House of Commons, would they?
You cannot exclude a member of Parliament from the House of Commons.
I know, and that's why I think it would be problematic. However...
No, you can't.
He said...
That's an absolute right of MPs to turn up. But you could not be turned away for not having a vaccine passport. I'm not going to show any vaccine passport.
But you're also not...
Nor are you.
Are you going to show a vaccine passport when you go into a nightclub, though, Peter?
Well, actually, look...
That is the question.
The fact that we are going night clubbing after this show is outrageous, but we don't have to show it tonight.
Please send pictorial evidence. I know Michael Gove will be proud of you both. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.